next layer up of the cosmos, we realize that our bodies, as a nucleus, have a vibrational field. And that vibrational field, which is really the electromagnetic field of radiance around our body, changes as our feeling changes, our vibration changes. And that's readable and detectable. So our emotional field literally vibrates out of our bodies. In the same way on the macrocosm, we notice that the Earth is surrounded by the moon. And as the moon travels around the Earth, the sunlight changes in how much it refracts off of the moon and shines onto the Earth at a time over a 28-day cycle. Those changes in the amount of vibrational reflection coming from the sun off of the moon to the Earth in turn change the amount of the electromagnetic spectrum shining onto the Earth from the sun at any one time. And that in turn changes our emotional field. It changes our experience of our emotions. It changes it for all sorts of animals, not just humans. We notice it most prevalently with dogs and other animals that are domesticated in our lives. We also notice it in our bodies with women's menstrual cycles, and we also notice it on all sorts of layers of ourselves as we find ourselves getting excited as the full moon approaches. These are just the first two layers of a hologram of the universe that directly reflects us. On the third layer, as we go down, we recognize that around the nucleus of every atom is electrons, and these electrons bond atoms to one another. And we begin to have a structure form. These structures of atoms bonding together create different molecular compounds. Molecules are simply structural forms of atomic energy, structural forms of mass and vibration together. The structural forms that we experience give us actually the sense in our consciousness of the difference between one solid object and another. It is not enough anymore simply to sense the mass or the weight of metal versus plastic or another form of solid object. Now we make distinction based on its structure, saying metal, plastic, crystal, wood. And those distinctions are a conceptual distinction that we make, a judgment based on the collection of senses that we have experienced with that object. In the same way, our mental body, conceptual body, forms different conclusions based on the physical senses and the vibrational emotional changes that we experience at different moments in our lives. On the next layer up, in the biocosm, cell nucleuses inside of whole cells with their organelles inside form tissues. These tissues are different structures in our bodies which allow us to have certain capacities for certain types of experience. For example, muscle tissue functions to create the experience of movement and change in the shape and the form of our bodies. Neurological tissues provide different shapes to channel electricity through our bodies in different ways. Blood tissues, bone tissues, all the different tissues of our body come together to form different specific functions in the way that they structure with each other. A bone tissue structure is fundamentally different from skin tissue structure. And it's just their structural differences that allow them to process different types of experiences. In the same way, thought structure differences, perceptual differences that we may make, distinctions that we make from one thing to another, provide a framework for us to process and think about things in a certain specific way. On the next level up, we recognize that our bodies and our emotional field are contained within a structure of our mind, a structure that is measurable as well electromagnetically, and that changes with each and every single thought that our mind has. But we don't necessarily notice this on a day-to-day basis. However, we notice it within our experience. We know right now for a fact that when you change your mind and the thoughts and the patterns of thinking in your mind, you immediately can experience a change in your emotional response and in your senses. It is as if a container around your field is changing form slightly, and now the electromagnetic energy flowing through that form in your emotional body and the physical mass level impulses and structure inside of your body begin to change immediately. On the macrocosm, we notice that the Earth and the Earth-Moon system orbit around a sun, and the sun forms the center of a structural system in which layer after layer of orbiting planets gather. Now these planets, as they travel around the sun, create waveforms of gravity, electromagnetic energy, and form different specific alignments to each other as they travel around the sun. These different alignments form different specific angles in which the light from the sun travels in, reflects off the planet, and then comes to the Earth. And so the Earth is receiving different angles of this electromagnetic energy from different planets within our solar system at different times. This is the heart of the science of astrology. We understand that different mental experiences, ideas, concepts, and perceptions change over time as planets position themselves in different locations around the sun and not only refract that sunlight back to the Earth, but also position themselves relative to the energy of the galaxy, which is radiating through from the background and into the celestial sphere of the solar system and the celestial sphere of the Earth. We can map our mental and structural conceptual changes based on this alignment of planets around us within our solar system. And we can also recognize that because there are specific electromagnetic changes in the way that the energy enters into our bodies in these different time periods, we can recognize that at the time we are born, of course, there is a direct imprint, the first imprint into our neurological system, into our brain from outside of our mother's womb. And at that moment of that first imprint of our brain as we exit our mother's womb, we receive an encoding that sort of sets our clock to a certain date and is going to then allow us to have an experience of changes in perceptions and concepts along the alignment of our clock and the similarities in our mental clock with other people around the planet. That's the first three layers: physical, emotional, and mental.